Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have got a terrifying lineup of Dogman encounters with some Goatman encounters and possibly a Skinwalker encounter. Now, all three are terrifying. But which one is more terrifying? Usually when a Dogman encounters a human, there is just fear. Occasionally, we may get a murder or a attack. Skinwalker, that's just terrifying. The Goatman, on the other hand, no encounter ever ends well with the Goatman. Before we get into today's upload, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's terrifying encounters. Shall we? Today's first encounter is a terrifying Goatman encounter. I'll start by saying my dad hasn't the best reputation of being honest. Not because he's a liar, but because of his drug use. Here's the thing, once he told me his story, and I got on there reading, so many minor details add up. The first thing I want to clarify, in West Plains, Missouri, and my dad is not that tech savvy and couldn't research a third grade science project, which made me even more astounded at what I read about this Goatman. So, on to his story, short and sweet. Him, a man named Mike, another guy were at my aunt and uncle's barn having a bonfire. There's about maybe a quarter-mile driveway up to the barn area and a single-wide trailer about 600 feet away. They're in the barn when he said they all heard what sounded like a stampede, something charging. He said this thing ran up to them in the barn in the light of the fire. Dad said it stunk to high hell, 6'1.5", matted fur, salivating goat head with horns and walking on hooves. Said it just stood and stared, breathing hard, salivating for about 1 to 2 minutes, and that him and his buddies just sat there looking at it in complete silence, frozen in terror. Then it just took off. Now, he said it felt like an eternity, but it just took off back into the woods about 7 to 1,000 feet away from the trailer I mentioned. Now, here's where shit gets even more weird. As he's telling me this, it clicks my cousin lived in that trailer. Said she had a nightmare one night. Something tapped on her window, and when she opened the blind, there was what she described as a goat monster standing there just breathing hard and salivating, just staring, and she woke up. Now, I haven't talked to her since my dad clarified it happened on her property, and not the Mark Twain National Forest. He had told me the story before as a kid, so he always told me it happened in the Mark Twain. I'm almost 28, and he came clean. It just all clicked. I froze up, got cold as shit, thinking of my cousin's nightmare. Goosebumps, the whole 9 yards. I start to tell him about the dream, and then I go to research some other sightings. If you've read them, you know everyone says this thing smells like shit, that it's only around a few minutes but feels like forever, that they were frozen in fear when they saw it, it's near the woods, and tried to manipulate and go after children. My cousin was in 7th or 8th grade at the time. Also, that it's always near graveyards, and there's a graveyard about a mile away from the property. I mean, one thing after another. I can't stop researching now. I have no idea, but I actually want to see this thing. Even as scared as I am, we have to take these people seriously, because I am a religious man and hand on the Bible. There were just too many coincidences that made this thing everything but untrue. Please, if anyone has any more information, I've grown obsessed. I'm talking to my cousin tomorrow about it to see if she can describe it. Don't get your hopes up. It traumatized her, and it was 15 or 16 years ago, and when my dad saw it, it was probably 20 to 22 years ago. Tonight's second encounter is a Dogman encounter. I live in a very secluded small town in southeast Tennessee. It's a really peaceful town during the day, but it gets somewhat strange at night. There are a few houses on my road, but for the most part, only trees. There are a few reoccurring events that are all pretty spooky, but the main one is what my friends and I call the Dogman, for a lack of a better word. I've only seen it twice in my life, and I've lived in this part of town for 3 years. The Dogman has a body shaped like that of a scrawny human. Its bones are very visible. It has fur, but only in patches over its body, sort of like a dog with mange. Though it has the body proportions of a person, it has the head of a dog and can run extremely fast. Also, it's fucking huge. It's a quadruped. To preface, my room is at the front of the house. Our front yard is the size of a field. I have the biggest window in the house in my bedroom, and it faces the front yard. I don't have blinds over my window, and my bed is in front of it. The first time I saw the Dogman, it was late at night. I was sitting in bed. I saw it running through my yard. Shortly after, my cat, who was an indoor-outdoor cat at the time, came inside growling. The cat was found dead across the creek near my yard this July. He had no visible injuries and was very young and healthy. We still don't know how he died. The second time I saw it was earlier this evening. My friend and I were sitting on my porch. We noticed a very large, moving mass on the base of the mountain, which we live right in front of. We decided to get a closer look. My friend stayed behind to watch as my grandfather and I drove down the road to the base of the mountain. I didn't want to drive there alone. As we got near, we stopped. In front of the mass, it was a tree. Something then sprinted out from behind it and into the woods to the right of us. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind it was the Dogman. Tonight's third encounter is a possible Goatman encounter. During high school, I was introduced to the abandoned barracks of Fort Ord near Monterey, California. At the time, it was just a fun abandoned place to explore with my friends. But soon I was informed of a legend that started to make encounters more chilling. A classmate of mine told me of what he thinks is a disgruntled homeless man who would roam the site. He told me this guy's violent, rabid even. The guy told me that for some reason it had horns, which I thought was an exaggeration, but I suspected that the guy may have cutaneous horns. One time I went alone to explore when I came across a foul-smelling underground room. There was an old mattress covered in grass and trash, as well as what I expected was a deer carcass on the floor of the room, along with more tiny bones and feathers, which most likely belonged to an owl. I hightailed it out of the room and headed home, as I did not want to come face to face with whatever was dwelling in that place. I've been back from time to time, and I've heard some scary noises, like screaming and loud thuds. If anyone is out exploring this place, I urge you to proceed with caution, as I know that whatever this thing may be, it's still there. Tonight's fourth encounter is a Cadejo encounter. It was a cousin's experience that I'm going to share with you, back in his teen years. My cousin used to stay at his friend's house late at night in El Salvador, and he had to walk a distance to get to his house. He said he and his friends would get drunk together almost every time they'd hang out, and eventually, as the night hit, my cousin would walk home. That was his routine every time he'd hang out with his friends. One day, he said it was about to hit midnight, and he lets his friend know he's leaving. As he's walking for some minutes, he starts going in some hills and said there was a lot of trees. He said the pathway was dark, and he would take a flashlight, which he happened to forget this night. He says he was walking, something tells him to turn back, and when he does, he notices a big black dog with weird eyes at a distance from him. He said he got scared because the dog was huge. He tried to walk towards the dog, and the dog would take steps back. My cousin would continue walking, and the dog would be walking behind him some feet away. He would try again to approach the dog, and the dog would again take steps back. My cousins ignored the dog, but continued to follow him. My cousin started getting really nervous, and was almost close to home. He eventually reached his main street and saw his house in the distance. When he was close enough to his door, he turned around and saw how the dog had just stopped walking and turned around and left back to where they came from. There's a story about Los Cadejos. There's pretty much two dogs, one white and one black. They say the black one takes care of drunk people from getting robbed, and the white one is bad. Some countries have this story as well, but vice versa with the dogs. Some places believe the white one takes care of people and the black one kills. Either way, my cousin was pretty freaked out. Tonight's fifth encounter is a Goatman encounter. First of all, I'd like everyone to know that this is not a fictional story and everything happened. It happened in Poland, 2013, around 1300 hours. I was hanging out with my cousin at his house. It was cold and it seemed logical to stay inside. However, I soon realized that my cousin was more interested in his video games than hanging out with me. Then, suddenly, I got the idea of taking a walk. As it was near Christmas, I wanted to experience the cold. I live abroad. I tried convincing my cousin, but to no avail. I put on my shoes and headed out. At first, I thought about just going to the center of town, which has close to 1,200 people. I scraped that idea as I was tired of big cities and urban environments and the noise and so on. I decided to have a walk around the outskirts of his neighborhood. I passed the flats, apartment complexes in the United States, the garages, sheds, and finally the gardens. A small dirt road formed from all the cars taking this way to get to the most remote part of town. The road continued down a small slope towards the river. At this point, I've realized how heavy the fog was. Nothing beyond 100 meters was visible. Pure what above that distance. I second-guessed myself once I got level with the makeshift soccer field. I remember playing football with my friends here when I was little. Kids were always very carefree. However, I always felt more perceptive when I was here. I would always decline any attempt to try to get me into the woods, which separated the river from the field, and which continued on for many lakes, villages, and plains. This was one of the biggest forests in the area. I quickly dispelled this thought as I told myself I'm no pussy. I continued down until I could hear the trickle of the river. At this point, I had to take a pause as my eyes were watering. PTSD or something, I assume. The next part was 20 meters steep uphill ascent, which separated the riverside depression from the train tracks. The communist and Nazi regimes gave us these iron hunks. I always thought it was strange that this was very singled-out train route, long with no branching, very straight from A to B. I got up the slope and turned right. I jumped as I saw an old man walking his dog. I was on the very edge. This was the first time I had seen this many, and he was walking very fast. I continued a bit forward, checking behind myself from paranoia. I went 20 or so meters. Everything then went quiet. I turned back and saw that the old man who had taken the long way back had vanished. He must have ran for cover for that distance between me looking back. That made me feel very uneasy. I felt the adrenaline kicking in as my vision started to tunnel a bit and my eyes started jumping to everything that moved or twitched. Now this is the part that's hard to talk about. At almost an instant, there was no wind, no sound, no man or dog, no life, nothing. The river, which flowed 10 meters to the right, went silent. The wind rustling enormous pines was gone. I looked around, a full 360 degrees, nothing. It put me at ease. Silence, I thought. Finally, I took maybe 10 steps forward. The noise of my walking on stones, which were dumped to keep the tracks from moving, almost thundering in the absence of the other noise. And then it happened. A figure, black, tall, slender, with a missing distinction between head and neck, with fuzzy, almost antler-like protrusions where his head was meant to be, ran from right to left, 40-odd meters away. It ran so fast. It made the 10-meter distance between one tree line to the next in a second at least. I don't know how to describe that instant. It was shorter than a blink. With its hands to its side, it almost took a humanoid form. It ran almost silently. I can't explain why, but I felt the lack of features of any sort, just limbs and that irregular antler structure. I turned around and ran so fast, the fastest I'd ever run, with leather boots, a winter jacket, 2 layers of trousers. I don't know, I thought it was coming after me, even though I saw it disappear into the forest to the left side. I ran and ran for the 100 meters. When I stopped, I realized I was safe. All the sound came back. The fog stayed, though, which made me more tense. I felt like now the fog was so thick nothing was visible for 50 meters. I don't know why, but I took out my phone. At the time, I thought I was brave, but now, as I'm much older, I can see how stupid that was. I turned around and started walking, recording, with my breath being so loud it bothered me. I tried to take shallow breaths, but I couldn't. I stopped in my tracks for the last time. I thought that's not worth it. It's not worth getting. Oh my God, I don't even want to know what anymore, just to prove to someone I wasn't making this up. I turned back, jogging, then power walking, then walking, when I arrived at the garages. I came back, my cousin, obviously oblivious to what had just happened, asked me, "How was it?" I hesitated and said what I saw. He half listened and came back with, "You're crazy, ha ha, no way, ha ha." I stopped, looked at the forest, and understood that was no laughing matter. I wasn't sure what I saw, but after looking at skin-crawler-type creatures, I think I found what I was looking for. Till this day, I've been there 3 times. 2 times with people, once by myself at midday summer, and nothing happened. I no longer take walks there. My friends had been teasing me about this, but noticed I don't react to it very well, so they've ceased to bother me about it. Looking at it now, it doesn't help that this train track region is known for suicides, and for a nearby pagan sacrificial stone where people have been sacrificed to the pagan god. I don't know what to think now of all of this, but I feel like the weight has just been lifted off my chest. Now I have told it to people that don't call me crazy or a liar for some reason. I am Christian, and if Satan has his beings roaming on this earth, by God, I've seen it that day. Stay safe, everyone, and take care. Today's sixth part of the upload is going to be a couple of encounters, brief encounters, that happened in Michigan or the surrounding area. 1930, Paris, Michigan. Robert Fortney is fishing on the Muskegon River near Paris. A pack of wild dogs suddenly come out of the woods. Fortney fires his gun and scares them off, except for one, a large black dog that stands on its hind legs staring at Fortney down with glaring eyes. Fortney shoots again and the creature then returns to the woods. The Michigan Dogman was allegedly first witnessed in 1887 in Wexford County. The cryptid is described as 7 feet tall, bright-eyed, walking upright canine with a human torso and terrifying howl that sounds like human screams. Sightings have been reported throughout Michigan, including the Ann Arbor area, but primarily are clustered in the northwest Lower Peninsula. 1998, Bristol, Indiana. A person wishing to remain anonymous. My husband and I were driving through Bristol, Indiana, not far from southern Michigan. It was dark, and I think it was December. There was snow on the ground. We were driving fairly slow due to the snow. Off to the right side of the road in the distance, we saw an animal standing near the side of the road. It was looking at us as we drove closer. As we got closer, we could see that it was smaller than a cow or a horse, but bigger than a dog. It's not a deer or a bear. Its eyes reflected as we got closer. We could see it was dark in color. It appeared the back legs were shorter than the front. When we were almost up to it, it turned and walked away. Not fast, just casually. But it was so dark we couldn't see once it was out of the view of the headlights. We always wondered what it could have been. I even thought maybe a wolverine, but it was far too big. Never heard of Dogman before this. 2011, Algonac, Michigan. After reading websites about Dogman and some articles, something hit me from about 5 to 7 years ago when I was in high school. One week, while cutting through the woods, we found a deer that looked as though it had been ripped in half along the trail we took. I didn't think much about it at the time, but now after thinking a lot about it, it didn't look like a human could do it unless he was the Hulk. During a few weeks, we would be out in the woods until nighttime and just messing around having bonfires and stuff. It always felt like something was watching us in the woods. 2011, Algonac, Michigan. After reading websites about Dogman and some articles, something hit me from about 5 to 7 years ago when I was in high school. One week, while cutting through the woods, we found a deer that looked as though it had been ripped in half along the trail we took. I didn't think much about it at the time, but now after thinking a lot about it, it didn't look like a human could do it unless he was the Hulk. During a few weeks, we would be out in the woods until nighttime and just messing around having bonfires and stuff. It always felt like something was watching us in the woods. 2003, Pictured Rocks, Michigan. It was dark. I was alone on Mosquito Beach, backcountry campground. Something obviously bipedal stands nearby, looking up the pole where I had hung my food. I can only make out the black shape. The pole clinks and the form drops onto all fours, bolting past my tent. My first thought was, that's the biggest dog I had ever seen. Alright guys, like I said, I've got some really good encounters to share with you tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed those. I got a couple of encounters, or interviews, excuse me, I'm working on. I still am working on the missing 411 with possible Dogman connection. I'm about 90% positive that the Dogman was involved on this missing 411. The more I read and the more I do research, I'm hoping to have that out by Wednesday. Hoping to have a interview for Tuesday. I'm pretty sure I got an interview from Thursday. And of course, I've got many more encounters sitting on my desk right now to share with you. So if I don't get those interviews, I definitely will be doing some narrating. Thank you for all of your support, everyone. I truly appreciate it.